Joining me now, Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California. The Reverend Al Sharpton, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, founder and president of National Action Network, and author of Righteous Troublemakers, Untold Stories of the Social Justice Movement in America. Tim Miller, host of the Bulwark podcast and MSNBC political analyst, and Michelle Goldberg, opinion columnist at the New York Times and also an MSNBC political analyst. This is fantastic to have all four of you on the show today. Congresswoman Waters, I'm starting with you because you predicted years ago, you said, I'm counting on Stormy. What do your reaction to Thursday's incredible verdict?
Thank you so very much for having us all on today. Let me just say it's a sad day for this country. I'm still shocked and amazed that his supporters would follow him with the lies and distortions that he continues to give to the American people. He says it's rigged. He says if they can do this to me, they can do it to you, bringing in others to cover the lies that he's telling. I'm amazed that those who claim to be so patriotic are so unpatriotic. I'm watching not only what happened in January 6th in Washington, D.C., but what is happening now. And men and women in the Republican Party don't have the courage nor the patriotism to stand up for democracy and what's good for America and understand and be able to honestly say to the American public that this used to be president, this former president is wrong. Whenever he loses, wherever he loses, he'll say it's rigged. He'll say that somehow he doesn't deserve to have to be lawful. Well, as the president said, no one is above the law. Those jurors on that jury are to be commended for what they have done. You had 7 men and 5 women who stepped up to the plate and did the hard work and rolled out to America and told America the truth. This man is guilty, not 1 time, 2 times, and 3 times, but on all 30 pounds. That's amazing.
Right. 34 times. As you were speaking, Congresswoman, you probably weren't able to see him beforehand, but he was nodding in agreement when you were talking about Republicans not having the courage to stand up to stand up for the truth. Tim, what's up with these folks?
And it's worse than that. What I was really nodding about is when Congresswoman Waters was talking about how they're being unpatriotic. I mean, it's hard to even, imagine this as somebody that grew up as a Republican. You'd think that it used to be the Republicans were like, if you turned the flag upside down and attacked the FBI and said that the U.S. justice system is rigged and that we're a banana republic, I mean, that would have been anathema to people in the Republican Party for years. And it was about American pride and respecting our institutions, respecting our systems. Now these people sound like anarchists. They are authoritarian. They want to tear down the entire justice system. You had Tim Scott there in your lead-in talking about how the justice system is hunting Republicans. This is absurd. Hunter Biden starts on trial, the president's son, in 2 days.
Right. And Rev, when we played that soundbite of Senator Scott talking about, vengeance and everything, you were like, whoa. Your reaction to that?
I don't know how you take just blatant lies and then end your comment quoting the Bible. That's why I said, well, that was a little difficult for me. But let me say this that I think we need to underscore. This whole case was about a man trying to cover his deeds because he wanted to win an election in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. And he had been exposed with the Access Hollywood tape where he talked about how you deal with women is to grope them, and I'm cleaning up what he really said, but many Americans have seen that. And if the Stormy Daniels affair had come out on top of that, it would have probably defeated him in his own mind. Now, the reason that is important is he was running against Hillary Clinton, talk about lock her up, about things that were absolutely ridiculous, some server at a house or something. He was saying lock her up. Fast forward to now. We find 34 felonies And you've got Republicans saying, how dare you? That's how he got there, accusing somebody of a crime and covering up his crime when there was no crime. And what's at stake for America is if Hillary Clinton had become president, we wouldn't have had three Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe versus Wade, hurt voting rights, and turned down affirmative action. That was the difference for people that said voting doesn't matter.
And Michelle, let me bring you in here before we go to a break, because I'm going to read something to you from The Cut. And it said, if Donald Trump ends up in a jail cell this year, it will be thanks in part to the remarkable testimony of a porn star whom he's been doing everything in his power to shame, silence, and discredit for 8 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, and she has been through hell and has been so brave and so steadfast. And the fact that she testified at all is evidence of Donald Trump's unbelievable self-defeating stubbornness. There was actually no reason for her to testify, except that Donald Trump's defense insisted not only that there was nothing illegal about the hush money scheme, but that he hadn't slept with her at all. It's just this kind of lies on top of lies, which can be a little bit more than a little bit. They're often numbing in the political sphere, but we've seen that they don't work in the legal sphere.
You know, I want to bring up something that Speaker Johnson said, his reaction to the verdict. Let's play that, and then we'll talk about it.
I do believe the Supreme Court should step in. Obviously, this is totally unprecedented, and it's dangerous to our system. I think that the justices on the court, I know many of them personally, I think they're deeply concerned about that as we are. So I think they'll set this straight, but it's going to take a while. You're right. The process takes a while to play out. This will be overturned, guys. There's no question about it. It's just going to take some time.
Tim, the Supreme Court, do they have any jurisdiction over the? What is he talking about?
I mean, these guys have become so presumptuous that they really do think that the Supreme Court is a political arm that is just going to do their bidding. I mean, that is how they act. You know, that is how they treat the Supreme Court. That is how Samuel Alito acts when he feels like he can just go to Fox and lie about what happened, with the flag outside his house. So I think that, I mean, no, they don't have any jurisdiction, but that's just one lie about this whole process. Tim Scott, going back to Tim Scott, he said that the Biden administration did this prosecution when it was a DA. There was no DOJ involvement about this. So they don't understand the system, or they're blatantly lying about it.
And Reb, the thing that jumped out at me, even more so than just the entire thing of what the speaker just said, is when he said, I know many of them personally.
That's right. I know many of them personally, implying that they and he are on the same page, that they're not going to be making a judicial decision, is that they're aligned politically, and in this case, maybe aligned in terms of Donald Trump. Because why would you even say, I know them personally, when you're saying that they ought to be ruling on fairness of law?
On the merits.
It is to confirm what many of us have suspected, that these were political nominees based on some partisan commitment, and that is why we have deep concerns about this court.
Everybody, Congresswoman, real fast.
Okay, you started out talking about, I had predicted this. I knew Stormy was a very strong woman and that she was not going to take it from Donald Trump. And she stepped forward detail by detail, and I expected her to do that. And because of her, this case has gotten to where it had gotten to. And she was the one that caused them to discover that he had lied on and filed false documents.
As we continue our coverage of Donald Trump's guilty verdict in his New York criminal trial, it's important to keep emphasizing the historic, unprecedented moment our country is in. Never before has a former American president been indicted and convicted in a criminal case, let alone while running for president again. Our nation has never seen anything like this, but a look back at our history might offer some clues about how to move forward. So let's ask Michael Beschloss, NBC News presidential historian and author of Presidents of War. Michael, as always, thank you very much for coming to the show.
Great to be together, as always. Thank you.
We have a guilty verdict against a former president on 34 criminal counts while he's also running for president. There's no legal or political precedent for what we are witnessing. But how does this compare to other destabilizing moments in our history?
Well, I think the choice is actually pretty clear. We've got a convicted felon, but, in days of yore, if a convicted felon had run, let's say, for alderman, which was probably about as high as he or she would have aspired until the last couple of decades, that person would have said, I served my time, I learned my lesson, I have remorse. There's going to be no one more zealous than I am in enforcing our legal system. Instead, you and I saw that rant at the bottom of the brass elevator in Trump Tower yesterday by the presumed Republican nominee of this year. And he's saying the system is rotten. I want to dismantle parts of the Constitution. I think that people should not respect the law. And so when you've got someone who is promising at the same time to be dictator for a day, and it'll never be for a day, as you know, it'll be for 4 years, if not for his lifetime, if that begins. At the same time as he's saying, I'm going to dismantle our rule of law, which is the glory of America, keeps the peace, assures fairness when it works for all Americans. You've got dictatorship and anarchy at the same time. Do you, Jonathan, think that a majority of Americans is going to vote for dictatorship and anarchy in November? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But however, we have seen some things, Michael, these last few years.
We have seen things we never expected.
Right. So the founding fathers seemed to have prepared for every threat to the republic that they created, but they didn't appear to have a convicted felon running for president on their bingo card. Would they be appalled by what happened on Thursday, meaning this former president, current candidate for president, being convicted on felony charges by a jury of his peers?
Most of the founders would cry if they saw what Donald Trump has been accused of and now convicted of, 34 felonies. Because they assumed when the Constitution was written, and you and I know these founders were by no means perfect people,
flawed.
But they thought that they had established a system that would keep convicted criminals out of the presidency. They assumed that anyone who ran for president would have the decency and the love of country and the knowledge of how hard it was to achieve our independence, that there would only be people of good character, like George Washington. And the other thing that they thought they had done was established a system, an electoral college, decentralized voting by states, other things, as well as an American public that would not willingly vote for a convicted criminal to be their president. They thought that that was so unlikely. You can read the record of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. There's not one word about what should we put in the Constitution to make sure that no convicted criminal becomes president. That's how far this country, sadly, has come. But I don't think a convicted criminal is going to be elected this fall.
And we've got less than a minute left, Michael. But what can Americans do to ensure that we get through this with our republic intact, especially because there are fears of political violence and calls for retribution?
This is going to be a 5 months period and maybe more of a kind that we have never seen before, sadly. We should brace ourselves and expect the worst. Hostile countries who want Trump elected, doing things in the world that make it look chaotic so that they can say Joe Biden is not in control. Upheaval fomented in the cities so that Donald Trump can say to the suburban women, let's say outside Philadelphia, you may not like me, but without me, you will not have law and order. Expect this. If we're lucky, it won't happen. If we're not lucky, it will. And make sure that through all of this, that central choice is preserved, that people understand this is a choice between Joe Biden, who loves democracy, and Donald Trump, who wants to bring you both dictatorship and anarchy at the same time. Make sure that people understand that's our choice.
Which side are you on now? Which side are you on? Which side are you on now? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Protesters filled the halls of the New Hampshire State House this week, urging Governor Sununu to veto anti-LGBTQ legislation on his desk. The bills before Sununu would roll back protections for transgender adults and require schools to notify parents of any LGBTQ content in class. And on the same day as those demonstrations in New Hampshire, the governor of South Carolina celebrated his state's new ban on transgender health care. The Palmetto State became the 25th state to outlaw best practice medical care for transgender youth. These restrictions reflect a surge in anti-LGBTQ legislation across the country, with the ACLU tracking more than 500 bills so far this year. That's why, on this first day of Pride Month, the nonprofit Lambda Legal is launching a $180 million campaign to fight for LGBTQ rights in court. Lambda Legal says it's the largest investment in the history of the LGBTQ equality movement. Joining me now to kick off Pride Month is Kevin Jennings, CEO of Lambda Legal. Kevin, thank you very much for coming to the Saturday show.
Thanks for having me on, Jonathan.
All right, real quickly, tell me about this $180 million campaign and how will this help Lambda Legal challenge anti-LGBTQ bills and laws across the country?
Well, Jonathan, as you noted, there are now 25 states that have passed restrictions on trans health care, and that means that Lambda Legal has a pivotal role to play. We are the community's last line of defense. The only hope now is, can Lambda Legal strike these laws down in court? So we are looking through our Unstoppable Future campaign to raise the funds to be able to challenge as many of these laws as humanly possible by hiring additional attorneys who will enable us to make sure that hate doesn't become law.
So the U.S. is, as I mentioned before, already breaking last year's record for the number of anti-LGBTQ laws that have been enacted. But I keep wondering, why is this happening now?
I think this is cynical politics, if you want my honest opinion. The extreme right has figured out an issue where they can take advantage of the fact that a lot of people do not know trans people, are not aware of the struggles of trans people. They're passing off misinformation as truth, and as a result, they are getting people whipped into a frenzy. So I think that it is genuinely cynical politics and just an effort to score some cheap political points.
You know, every time Lambda has been part of a case before the Supreme Court, you've won. But how concerned are you that this Supreme Court, with its 6-3 conservative supermajority, will strip us of our rights? I mean, Justice Thomas in the Dobbs, there's so many cases. In the Dobbs concurrence, he said that Lawrence and Obergefell should be reconsidered.
Well, Lambda is very proud of our victories in Lawrence, which struck down sodomy laws, right, and Obergefell, which won marriage equality. We're also very proud of the fact that this court, with only one change in personnel, in 2020 ruled in the Bostock decision that you could not fire people based on gender identity or sexual orientation. That's why we've asked the court to consider a case where we are counsel in Tennessee, which is a situation where they have banned trans health care for young people. And we are asking the court to overturn that ban, and we are confident that we are on the right side of history and that we can win.
Last question for you. The president has called on Congress repeatedly to pass the Equality Act. It's going nowhere. We all know that. But how would it improve the legal landscape for LGBTQ Americans if it were to pass?
I saw an interesting poll recently, Jonathan, where over 70% of Americans already thought there was a federal law that protected LGBTQ plus people from discrimination. That is not true. The Equality Act was first introduced in 1974, 50 years ago, and Congress has yet to act. It is absolutely critical that we pass the Equality Act and enshrine in American law that discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation is not acceptable.
Joining me now is large D Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler of New York. He's the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman Nadler, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday show. Republicans say their efforts to undermine Trump's conviction in the justice system is about respecting the rule of law. Your thoughts?
It's exactly the opposite. The rule of law is respecting the decision of a jury. The rule of law is to let the judicial process play out. The moment that D.A. Bragg announced the grand jury indictment back in, I forget when it was, a number of months ago, Chairman Jordan convened a field hearing in New York of the Judiciary Committee for the purpose of dumping on Bragg. And now, of course, he's saying that the Weaponization Subcommittee is going to call in Bragg, all because Bragg secured a conviction on a mountain of evidence by 12 jurors. And now we see the jurors, people trying to threaten the jurors. And, of course, the Republicans in the Senate and the House speakers, you heard, threatening the justice system. Mm-hmm. This is an attempt to upend the justice system in the United States. And it's an attempt to say you cannot prosecute President Trump or former President Trump because he is above the law. Mm-hmm. And it's a terrible threat to free government in the United States.
You know, this isn't the first time Congressman Jordan has used the Judiciary Committee to target Trump's prosecutors. Just ask Fani Willis, the Fulton County DA in Georgia. How do you expect his invite to DA Bragg to play out?
I assume that Bragg will decline to appear, and he may even cite Chairman Jordan's refusal to obey the subpoena of the January 6th committee, because certainly this is way outside the jurisdiction of a House committee to investigate a local DA. Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, you're leading an investigation into Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito's potential bias. What information are you requesting from Chief Justice Roberts?
Well, the question is not just Alito, it's also Thomas.
Right, Justice Thomas.
It's also Justice Thomas, because even if you believe everything Alito says, he knew nothing about the flags that were flying. His wife did it. He never even knew about it. I mean, he doesn't say he didn't, but even assume he never knew about it. A judge is required to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Ditto for Justice Thomas. Given his wife's role in the January 6th insurrection, he should be recused, again, just because of the appearance, from anything to do with the January 6th cases, as should Alito. If this were any court other than the Supreme Court, the binding rules of ethics, the binding ethics law, would force their recusal. Supreme Court has a non-binding ethics code, but they should certainly recuse themselves. And if they don't recuse themselves, they're just showing their unfitness to be Supreme Court justices, frankly.
Well, you know, your House colleague, Democratic colleague, Congressman Jamie Raskin, suggests that the Justice Department could ask the 7 other Supreme Court justices to require Justices Alito and Thomas to recuse themselves from the Trump immunity case. How realistic is that?
Well, I think the Justice Department should request that. Whether you get a majority of the Supreme Court to agree with that, I don't know.
One more question for you before I have to let you go. Trump's extreme rhetoric has only intensified since January 6th. What are you doing or trying to do to prevent or at least prepare for the possibility of political violence this election year?
Well, there may very well be political violence. President Trump or former President Trump is inviting it. Every time you see one of the Republican senators or congressmen go on TV and say, will you respect the result of the election? And they say, if it's fair, meaning if Trump wins or they agree with it, they're inviting violence. The Justice Department has to be prepared to enforce the law. There's nothing else you can say. You have to be prepared to enforce law against any violence. And this time, unlike January 6th, understand that there may very well be and prepare for it in advance.
Congressman Jerry Nadler, the great state of New York, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday Show.
Thank you.